Welcome back to the On The Court podcast. I'm your host Alexa, and today we're going to be doing a bit of a different episode again, and not going to be doing a recap because honestly, I was kind of thinking about it and I was like, what can I talk about today that's been happening in the NBA that's of relevance? And I mean, we can obviously talk about how LeBron is on a tear. We can talk about the unrest in Houston, which I just heard about yesterday. We can talk about the COVID impacts, but overall, it's been a bit of a slow couple of weeks from a stories perspective, for me to recap, so to speak. So what I'm going to do today instead is I'm going to be sharing who I believe out of the current players, the players who are currently playing, who are the first ballot Hall of Famers, in my opinion, as well as the ones that are maybes at this point. Ones where I could see the argument for it. I just don't see it right now for them to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, but you never know. So I'm going to share those today. So I've got my list here, my trusty list. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you why I gave these names to explain, obviously why I decided they're first ballot Hall of Famers. But let's get into the list, Without further ado, let's get into the list. So number one is LeBron James. Honestly, I probably don't even need to talk about it, which I'm not going to. If you don't think that LeBron James is going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, you are either trying to troll or you're just not familiar with the NBA. So I'm not even going to be discussing why LeBron James is a first ballot Hall of Famer. He just is. So that's number one. The second one is Giannis. Now, Giannis, when you look at his, his resume. That's the word, resume. When you look at his resume now at his young age, we don't even know what else he's going to be achieving. But just now, I mean, his, two-time MVP. He's a finals MVP. He's a NBA champion. He's a he's just got all these accolades. I'm not going to list through every single accolade that he's got, but he's got all these accolades at this young age that it's crazy. It's like you can't dispute the fact that he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. In fact, I'll be very, very surprised if he does not achieve first ballot Hall of Famer status. So Giannis, even at his young age, he's definitely one that I'm going to put in there. So it's, again, another one that's like obvious, but I can see why some people would say no, because they think that some people say that he's overrated, so, et cetera. Not so much now, okay? And I'll be honest, I was guilty of it when he first started making a bit of an impact, but not quite yet. I was saying he was a bit overrated as a superstar. I take my words back. I was wrong. I was completely wrong. He's definitely a first ballot Hall of Fame in my eyes, just on the lines of his resume and the dominance that he has on the court. Number two, Giannis. Number three is KD, okay? So Kevin Durant has two finals MVPs, as well as an MVP, as well as being an NBA champion twice. He's got a scoring title, all this sort of stuff. And he is regularly considered one of, if not the best players on the planet. Right now, he's atop of the leaderboard for MVP. He is one that if he doesn't become a first ballot Hall of Famer, I'll be very surprised. Very, very, very surprised, just because of the impact he's had in the game and the level of play that he plays with. Kevin Durant. An easy choice as well. As you can see, the first few of these are pretty much easy choices. I could just list them off and you'd be like, yeah, cool, I agree with it. There'll be somewhere I'm going to explain why I've chosen them, because some people could put an argument forth of, nah, that shouldn't be the case. I'll explain my justification, don't worry. Next one is Stephen Curry, okay? Steph Curry. If you don't think that the greatest shooter in the world, who's had such a big impact on the game, who is a multiple NBA champion, who you think is one of the greatest PGs of all time, point guards. Although some people do say that he might be more of a shooting guard, and I can see the argument there. You would be crazy to not think that Steph Curry is not going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I mean, just on his resume alone and the impact he's had in the game, the fact that he really was the one that started this whole change to the three-point line, this dominance on the three-point line, you have to put him in the Hall of Fame 100%. But I reckon he's a first ballot as well. It's very hard to dispute that. It's just very hard to do so. Now the next one is my favorite player, which if you've listened to this podcast, you already know, is Russell Westbrook. And that's the one that's going to divide a lot of people, because there's going to be people that say, yeah, nah, despite the fact that he's got his shortcomings, despite the fact that I don't like him, et cetera, people make those arguments. They'll say, but he's still a first ballot Hall of Famer. Then there will be people that say, I don't like him for all these reasons. He's definitely not a first ballot Hall of Famer. There might be even people that say he's not a Hall of Famer. In my eyes, with the resume that he has and how dominant he's been at his position, I can't dispute the fact that he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. 4 times he's been he's had triple doubles as an average for the year. He's got the triple double record of all time. The dominance that he has at the PG position, historically, he's had a bit of a rocky year this year at start, but other than that, has had a solid career in that aspect, despite the fact not winning an NBA championship. And keep in mind, a lot of legends have not won an NBA championship. It's a lot harder than people think. I just can't go by, all those facts, all the achievements that he's had to not put him as a first ballot Hall of Famer, despite the fact that he's not a great shooter, despite the fact that, he plays so hard, it's sometimes to the detriment of making turnovers and that sort of stuff. I get that sort of stuff. But overall, I still see him as a winning player. Just because he hasn't won a championship does not make him not a winning player. And the fact that he's got that strong resume, well, in my eyes, first ballot Hall of Famer there. Now, Melo, so Carmelo Anthony is someone that a lot of people will say yes, he's a definite Hall of Famer, but not everyone will say he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. Well, to that I say, he's one of the greatest scorers of all time. He's in the top 10 of scoring of all time. But also, not just because of his NBA career, but also because of his Olympic career, and as well as his college career, you have to put him in there. Because remember, the Hall of Fame is not just NBA. So people tend to think like, the Hall of Fame, what's the achievement they achieved in the NBA? And that's not the way it works, okay? It's the global game of basketball. And when you look at that, Carmelo Anthony, the impact he's had on USA basketball, the fact that he's had that great career in his college year, you can't dispute the fact that Carmelo Anthony has to be in the Hall of Fame. And because of those reasons, I put him in as a first ballot Hall of Famer. Could be wrong there, but in my opinion, that's what goes, okay? Because I'm looking at the full body of his work, not just his NBA career, which I get where people could be like, yeah, he's never made a finals, he's never won an MVP, he's et cetera, et cetera. You can put all these factors there, but just looking at everything else, I can't not put him in there. So Carmelo Anthony going that first ballot Hall of Famer in my eyes. Now, next one is Dwight Howard. Now, despite the fact that he was wrongly, I'll say it, he was wrongly not put on the top 75 list, he should have been on there in front of some people that should not have been on there, in my opinion. Dwight Howard, just because of his career early on with Orlando, the defensive threat that he was, and then, the stats that he's put up before, and the career that he's had as a whole, not just in the last few years where people started hating on him as a whole, I have to put him there as a first ballot Hall of Famer. Now, he's the one where you could make an argument. For me, he's one of those, I put him into the first ballot Hall of Fame, but I can see how he might not be. If he goes against a strong class, I can see him not going in there. Okay, it's one of those ones. But I just look at his numbers, I just look at the impact he's had on the game, and I can't not put him in there. So that's just what I've done. I'll put him in there, but I can see the argument that he might not be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I get that, but I still feel that the impact he's had puts him in that conversation. Just what it is. And then, we're up to the final two. So there's not many. There's not many people. In fact, there is nine to discuss. Next one is Kawhi Leonard. Just, I understand some people think that he got a lot of praise for that year when he was in Toronto, and those achievements he made there made him to be this big commodity in the NBA when maybe he wasn't as much. I get those arguments. I get it fully. But just the fact that he's a two-time NBA champion, two different teams, the fact that the impact he has on the game, how he's the versatile play style that he has, and just the level of effectiveness that he has on the court, you can't dispute that fact. And now he's a Defensive Player of the Year, obviously, as well. So the thing is, when you win a lot of these big awards, like MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, you already become in the conversation for first ballot Hall of Famer, because it's kind of that elite club of very rarely will not happen. I believe the only person that's for example, won MVP who I feel, based on the career afterwards, will not be in the Hall of Fame is Derrick Rose, unfortunately. Okay? Unfortunately, because of everything that happened afterwards, you can't put him in the Hall of Fame discussion. So other than him, everyone else has been MVP, a lot of people who's been Defensive Player of the Year, they're all definitely Hall of Fame, but a lot of them are first ballot Hall of Famer. And because of that, you can't dispute the fact that Kawhi Leonard should be in there. Okay, he's very likely going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I'll be very surprised if he's not. I'll be very surprised with his resume of work that he wouldn't be just thrown in there. Just what it is. And then finally, James Harden, which is one of those ones where, again, it's maybe for some people it's a bit of a here or there, because he's very much a scoring threat. His numbers are ridiculous. He's had some numbers that were not even close to being touched before Will Chamberlain. now he's hitting those numbers. Not in this year, obviously, but you know what I mean. But even so, because of the level of numbers, the fact that he's won an MVP, all this sort of stuff, you can't dispute the fact that he's most likely going to be a first-ballot Hall of Famer. Now, if he wins a championship, then you can just definitely put him in there. That's the only thing that's against him is he doesn't have a championship. Okay, for Harden, the only thing that's holding it against him is the fact that he's got to a finals, but he's not gone to winning a championship. That's the only thing that could potentially be holding it against him. But even so, even if he doesn't achieve that, I still feel he's a first-ballot Hall of Famer, but I think he's going to achieve one by the end of his career. Just the fact that he's in Brooklyn now with Kevin Durant, it would be very surprising if he doesn't win at least one. But you never know. Of course, you never know with championships. Like I said, it's a lot harder than people think. But yeah, James Harden's in there just because of the scoring numbers that he's put up are ridiculous, historic scoring numbers. Got to put him in there. So that's my 9, okay? That's my 9 that I believe from current players who are going to be first-ballot Hall of Famers. We've got LeBron James, we've got Giannis, we've got KD, Steph Curry, Russell Westbrook, Carmelo Anthony, Dwight Howard, Kawhi Leonard, and James Harden. Small group, literally only 9 people. There's no, I looked through the list, I checked it twice, I went over it, and I can't think of anyone else who I put on that list as in my opinion, being a first-ballot Hall of Famer, not as of right now. Which brings me on to the next thing, which is a maybe, okay? These are the maybes. These are the ones where they're so close to potentially being that, but it's dependent on how the rest of their career goes, depending on what class they're in, and depending on just how the voting goes. Number 1 is Draymond Green. I'll be very, especially because I think he's going to win Defensive Player of the Year now again. So he is very close to being in that first-ballot Hall of Fame discussion for me, but I just did not put him in there just because the fact that he's generally been overshadowed by Steph Curry on his team, by the Kevin Durant on his team. But even so, I will give him, I'll give him the respect that he deserves. Draymond Green is right up there. And I reckon with definitely another championship, another Defensive Player of the Year award, whatever you want to give it, I reckon he could be definitely in that discussion, but he still was more of a maybe for me. I wasn't just sure enough to put him in that first list. But I get fully the arguments for him being on that list, so keep that in mind. Next one is CP3. Now CP3 is one of those ones where people consider him one of, if not the best, point guards from a skill perspective, but just the fact that he's not won a championship holds a big kind of cautionary kind of flag above him as being an all-time great. That's just the discussion around him. And to put him in as a first-ballot Hall of Famer, I can see the discussion for it, but the fact that he has not won the championship is the thing that's holding it against him. But I can fully see, just based on his numbers, how good of a point guard he is, despite the fact, to be fully upfront, I'm not a Chris Paul fan. I don't really like him that much. I still respect him, the skills he has as a point guard. So he's another one where I couldn't just put him in that first ballot. And people could be like, oh, but you put Westbrook in there. He hasn't won a championship. Westbrook, just looking at the historic numbers that he's put up against the ones that Chris Paul has put up, that's the fact that it goes against that. Chris Paul still is very much someone who's very close to potentially being that first ballot Hall of Famer. Just at present, I couldn't put him in there. Next one is Jokic. So Jokic is putting up historically efficient seasons, like ridiculously historic efficient seasons. He's an MVP. So again, that discussion on, well, if you're an MVP, surely you'll be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I still feel he hasn't done enough in his career to warrant that. I just feel like he's not. I get how some of these things, I'm putting people in the first ballot Hall of Famer who haven't, who haven't won championships, and then I'm saying this and that. I just feel like Jokic at this stage, okay, he's just not there yet. Give him a couple more years for a championship, keep up the consistency that he's at, and I'll throw him in there. But just now, as close as he may be, he's just not there yet. He's just not a first ballot Hall of Famer. Will he be a Hall of Famer? 100%. Is he a first ballot Hall of Famer? That's up for discussion. Next one is Damien Lillard. So Damien Lillard was, as much as I like Damien Lillard, don't get me wrong, big fan, despite the fact that he's broken my heart a couple of times when I was going for the OKC. I did not believe he should have been on the top 75 list. And because on the top 75 list, you can make an argument that whoever is on that list should be automatically first ballot Hall of Famer. I still feel Damien Lillard has not done enough. He has not reached the finals. He has not had a great run in the playoffs. Overall, his numbers are not that historic. When you actually look at it, he's not like the top, he's not leading the 3-point line. He's not leading this and that. There's not many things he's leading in. It's just that he's such a skilled player who people feel should have already been in that discussion of winning a championship or having an MVP season. He just hasn't got there yet. So despite the fact that for whatever reason he was put into the top 75 over Dwight Howard, I don't know why, I still feel like Damien Lillard is potentially in that first ballot if his career goes a lot more effectively from here. But as of now, definitely not. He's one of the ones in the maybes where I put maybe just because of the fact that he's on the top 75, but I definitely do not think that he's might be in the first ballot Hall of Fame discussion. At the present time, as much as I love Damien Lillard, Dame time, it's not his time for that. Okay, just the reality. And then finally, Rajon Rondo. Okay, actually not finally, I've got two more, sorry. Rajon Rondo is someone who has been an assist leader, 2-time championships. He's had that impact at a point guard position, and he's just been an effective player overall. Because of that, he's definitely in the Hall of Fame for me. Some people argue that he's not. In my opinion, he is. Do with that what you will. The reason I put him as a maybe was because of the impact he has at that position in the last decades or so. Some people will be like, you're crazy to even think that he's potentially a first ballot Hall of Famer. To me, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer if he gets another championship and if he goes against a weak class. If that happens, he's potentially a first ballot. But it's still not a strong case. It's still kind of the Damien Lillard effect for me, where I'd be very surprised if he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. But I had to put him in there just because I do feel like he's had a great career overall. Just from a point guard perspective and the fact that he's been an assist leader, that sort of stuff. Had to put him in there. Okay, and then a couple of final ones. Klay Thompson, another one who people believe should have been on the top 75. That was one of the ones that I kind of disagreed with. I thought that the Draymond Green should have been in the top 75. I did not think Klay should have been, despite the fact that he's a great shooter. I still feel like he hasn't had that impact like Steph has had. He's close up there, but I just don't think that he was supposed to be in the top 75. Because of that reason, I understand he's going to be a Hall of Famer, but I do not think that he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer unless something great happens from here onwards in his career, but I just don't see it. But I can see the discussion there for him being one if he's against a weak class. That's why I threw him in there. Klay Thompson, great player, great guy. I just don't see him as the first ballot Hall of Famer. But the reason, like I said, I put him as a maybe, depending on how his career pans out from here onwards, and depending on what class he goes against, could put him in that conversation. And then finally, okay, the final person to discuss is PG-13. None other than Paul George, another one of my more favorite players. As of now, though, he hasn't had enough of a career to warrant being in the first ballot Hall of Famer discussion. In terms of being a Hall of Famer, I just feel like the talent that he's had, the effectiveness that he had, I feel like he could be in that discussion. I just don't know where his career is going to go from here, but he's having a solid season. Unfortunately, about with the injury he's had now, but he's had a solid season. And honestly, I do see him winning a championship. So I do feel that he will be in the Hall of Fame. But just as of now, I don't feel he's in the first ballot Hall of Fame discussion because he hasn't had enough playoff success to warrant that. In fact, he's had some playoff blunders that kind of puts a mark against him when it comes to that conversation. But a big fan of him. Honestly, I do hope he wins a championship, at least eventually. He had those years in Indiana where he was almost there, but he obviously had to go against a LeBron James led team. It just is what it is. He had a great season last year. Great season this year so far until he got injured. Let's hope that it's success from here onwards. I see him potentially being in that discussion, but just as of now, there's not enough to warrant it. So really, when you look at the maybes, the one that really have a solid case is Draymond, CP3, and let's put Jokic in there as well, just because of how being an MVP and obviously the efficiency that he's had, the great seasons statistically that he's had. We all know how much the NBA and that love statistics. That puts people in the conversation no matter what. So Draymond Green, CP3, and Jokic are very much maybes that are probably going to be first ballot Hall of Famers. Damien Lillard, Rajon Rondo, Klay, and PG-13 are definitely just maybes, and some of them are really, so far, weak cases for first ballot. But I had to throw them in there just because of the skill level and just because of the potential there is for that. That's the reason. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed my list. Let me know, okay? Send me a message. Follow me on the Court Podcast at Instagram and send me a message. Let me know if you agreed with my list. Let me know if you disagreed with my list. Let's have a discussion. It'll be fun, okay? Just at me and we can go from there. But yeah, hope you enjoyed my list. Hope I explained everything I need to explain. But yeah, until next time, see you on the court.